So after certain instances, Trump was supposed to meet him, President Trump was supposed to meet Zelensky in Poland himself. But then he used the excuse of the hurricane, but it wasn't because of the hurricane, it was because he was angry that Zelensky still didn't make any attempt or effort to make any announcement before he was going to meet him. And he
How do you know that was an excuse and that wasn't the real reason?
Because I spoke to Rudy. Rudy would talk to me. We spoke about this every day. I mean, everything that was going on was discussed between me, Victoria, Rudy, the team.
So President Trump is supposed to go. He decides not to go. Vice President Pence will go instead.
He sends him instead, yeah. And basically, he was supposed to go there and get it straightened out that Zelensky was supposed to make another announcement. And that didn't happen. And that's when Secretary Bolton went over there, and I think he has a lot to say. I'm not going to talk on this, but I think he's a key witness to his conversation with Zelensky and when he came back and why he left or got fired or however you want to look at that.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. When Vice President Pence went over there on September 1st, again, in President Trump's stead, you believe, or you have reason to believe, that Vice President Pence was tasked at that meeting with getting President Zelensky to announce investigations of Joe Biden specifically.
Yes.
And to tell him that they wouldn't get their aid until they...
I don't know exactly what he was, but it was all, it's all the same.
Investigation.
Yeah. So, like I said, the aid itself was something that I think the president decided to do, but it was, I think, a reaction to that there was no announcement being made after so many attempts and so many promises.
So holding the aid was the president's own sort of innovation to add to the leverage, to add to the pressure that people like you and the vice president and Mr. Giuliani and everybody else involved in this effort was putting on the Ukrainian government.
Correct.
When you say that Mr. Bolton may have things to say about this, did Mr. Bolton know that Vice President Pence was supposed to secure that agreement from Zelensky, that he'd announced these investigations?
I don't know exactly what Mr. Bolton knew, but I know Mr. Bolton was definitely involved in the loop because of the firing of Maria Yovanovitch. Also, his interactions with Rudy Giuliani, they started butting heads. And he was not agreeing. It was, from Venezuela to Ukraine, Bolton didn't agree with Giuliani on the way of dealing with it. So there was tension there. There was definitely tension.
But you believe he knows what the administration was pressuring Ukraine to do?
Bolton, 100%. He knows what happened there.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.